Need a level.
I don't know, and I also keep
Is
falling
the
back.
dial
It's a dial?
not there? It's the other one a little further.
No.
He'll be back tomorrow, I
crank?
think.
Oh, there it is. Oh, there.
Yeah. I just changed my password today, and it's like,
Now we're cooking with gas.
But you can't be like sitting there.
we
'cause then you
will.
fall
Nate's
down.
got a budget presentation.
I'm going up there.
Yeah, we just have to
We said to
broadcast
turn
it.
the
I know last week I had that
Oh.
problem. I had an even lower seat than I did
Well,
today.
you've got,
and I was sitting next to
Brandy
She
and
wrote today.
Jean have presentations too.
Yep. Yeah.
Hey, you want to sign this real quick?
But it didn't
sure.
say about
It's just
the
$7 million.
memo or random memo.
Mark, how's your throat?
Oh, it did? Okay, all right.
Okay,
Yeah, I understand this should be.
it is past 7 o'clock. I don't know if you're all ready, but I'm ready to have a meeting. So there we go. Let's just turn this thing on here so I can get my agenda up. First of all, I want to welcome everyone to the May 15th regular meeting of the City Commission. I want to say thanks to all those that are here in the audience and also those that are at home watching. We'd like to begin our meeting I'd like to begin our meeting to acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered is the territory of the Ottawa and Chippewa peoples who have stewarded this land throughout generations. We thank you for your strength and resilience in protecting this land and aspiring us to uphold our responsibility to do the same. As we go through this meeting tonight, I hope that we can all interact with each other with respect, dignity, patience, and charity. With that, let's see here. Who can I pick on? Colleen, would you? Yes. Yeah. Would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Mr. Maritat, roll call, please.
Yes, good evening. Commissioner Werner? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Shamrow?
Here.
Commissioner Wilson?
Here.
Commissioner Stanley?
Here.
Commissioner Treadwell?
Here.
Commissioner Colbert?
Here.
And Mayor Lewis?
Here. First item on our agenda is the graduation. Can we start pomp and circumstance right now? And so I want to watch them parade now. Graduation of our first City Academy class. So
Thank you. It is exciting to be here for this. This is an inspirational moment. We've had an inspirational class. This is the inaugural class for the city's academy. And I'm going to really turn this over to Colleen to officiate. She served as a program director, but I just wanted to take a moment and say that Colleen Pavelio and Katie Miller from my team have just knocked this right out of the park. And I want to give you two a round of applause to begin. You did do it, and these folks here have stepped up, and we're counting on you to fulfill your promise to get involved and advocate and engage. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Colleen. Thank you.
Does that TV go on in here?
Oh.
Oh, okay.
Do I do this?
This is all the new stuff in the chamber.
Okay.
when that one goes on, they'll all go on,
Okay.
Okay.
we think.
Yeah, hopefully.
We
Here
have
we
that.
go. All right.
Okay.
There we go. I mean, such a beautiful photo.
It is.
Okay, well, I am Colleen Pavelio. I serve as communications specialist in the city clerk's office and had the pleasure of serving as program director for the inaugural City Academy. I do want to thank you for the kind words. I do want to start also by thanking all of the departments that embraced this program and really helped us make it a success. It's great to work with a team that cares deeply about the city. And then also Katie, who was my sidekick through it all, so thank you. And then all of these individuals, thank you. It's been really special, I'm not gonna lie, it's been great. So, so if you recall, I did present the program to all of you in January, and we had 3 goals for the program, and that was knowledge, community relations, and involvement. And really, we wanted to educate these individuals. We wanted them to become ambassadors for the city, potentially grow a pipeline for interest in boards and commissions, but also we wanted to learn from all of them. As city residents ourselves, I think that there was a lot of synergy, but We made it a safe space. We had different opinions. We had the same opinions. And I think we all really learned from each other as residents and staff members. So when we kicked this off, we didn't know what it was going to look like. We didn't know if people would be interested in the program, and we had about 50 applicants, which was a great problem to have. It was a little overwhelming to kind of narrow that down to an intentional number, less than 15, so we could all fit on a bus, so we could manage each other and have thoughtful conversations. We had a budget for the program, but we had 11 neighborhoods represented, and we had an individual lived in the city for 48 years, one individual lived in the city for 3 months. We had every decade represented from the 40s all the way up to early 2000, and you can kind of see those red dots, but this is this cohort. This is where they represented throughout the city. And so we think we did really well, and they were an inquisitive crew, and really, like I said, brought wide representation to the city. So we have a lot of fun photos, and we wanted to share them. So we did get to shoot off fire hoses, so thank you to the fire department. But our first session, we really just went over Government 101. Our second session, we talked about the city clerk's office, the fire department, the police department. They were gracious to host us at the fire department. We even got to sing happy birthday to Chief Tuller, so that was excellent. Session 3 was at the DPS campus, and you'll see them in the composter machine. We had Sarna there talking as well with the green team, as well as Brandy with Traverse City Light and Power, and I've shared this story before, but Sarna wrote me an email after, and she said, how about that composter, hubba hubba. So, you know, it's just the little things are the big things that really kind of wow us all. We took a bus with Art and the DMU staff, and we were able to tour the water treatment plant and the wastewater treatment plant. Session 5, we were at Hickory Hills. It was great to show off that facility. Not everybody had been there, or some folks hadn't been there since it had been renovated. You can see the group. We planted 2 trees, and Matt Bright, the city's Parks and Recreation supervisor, is putting the tree into the system, and we named them City Academy 1 and 2, and the group had planted trees there. Session 6, we really focused on planning and zoning and engineering, and also the DDA, and then had a really fun public art tour throughout downtown. So the group is under the public art piece Inspire here. And then we were really intentional to have Session 7 review budget, you know, everything that they had learned, kind of talk about where our revenues and expenditures are with the city, and then we played a really fun mock budget game. I had to continually remind them, this is fake, but we really did use a lot of the percentages that you were reviewing actually even tonight for the draft budget, but they had to make very difficult decisions. They balanced a budget on their own, and then we put them into mini city commissions, and they had to compromise and balance that budget. And then tonight, we talked about appointed boards and commissions, kind of empowerment, influence, advocacy, and what it takes to sit on a city commission or a board or commission. So it has been an incredible experience. This picture you'll see here, Matt Bright had like staged a truck. I mean, we work with great people, and I just want to point that out again, that we have a really good staff. And one of my favorite things was seeing this group connect immediately with staff and build those relationships. So with that, these are just a couple quotes from city staff expressing their appreciation, as well as some participants. One participant, she's going to know who I'm talking about when I say this, but she just keeps on saying, you know, I'm so wowed at our small city giving big city services, and you know, we have to give the same services as any city in the country, and we also have to be stewards for the waterways that we have here, and we also own a ski hill, so we have all these other complexities, but everybody just had a lot of great things to say, so I wanted to share a couple of those with you. And with that, we will start our graduation and give the diplomas. We do have a plant for everybody. I really wanted to do seedlings, but it's past that time. I called everywhere. But just kind of metaphorically, these individuals are spreading their roots even further. So we have a little succulent for them and a diploma. So we will call their name one by one, and we will get started. So first we have Alice Bowie. Alice, congratulations. Okay, second, we have Lisa Brady. Thank you, Lisa. All right, Matt Bullock. Okay, Bobby Busley. Bobby. Thomas Comerford. You're welcome. Thank you, Tom. It's been a pleasure. All right, Debbie Douglas. Margaret Faco. Welcome. Megan Holtry. Caroline Kennedy. Jack Langford. David Page. Michelle Perez. Kathleen Record. And lastly, we have Merrick Roman. All right. Any questions for us? No. Thank you so much.
Thank you to all the candidates.
So-
Accolades. It was wonderful.
Are you going to be doing this again next year?
Yes, we will
Yay.
be. Right,
Absolutely,
Benjamin?
100%.
Okay.
Yes. Kidding. Thank you again, Colleen and
Thank you.
Katie.
We have two mayoral proclamations to give tonight. First one is for National Police Week. And if have our captain up here, please. Richmond. How are you?
Good.
Nervous?
Oh, no.
Okay, darn. Thank you. This is a proclamation recognizing May 14th through the 20th, 2023 as National Police Week. The Senate and House of Representatives of the United States of America and Congress assembled that the President is authorized to request to issue proclamations designating May 15th of each year as Peace Officers Memorial Day in honor of the federal, state, and municipal officers who have been killed or disabled in the line of duty. Designating in each year the calendar week during which such May 15th occurs as Police Week in recognition of the service given by the men and women who night and day stand guard in our midst to protect us through enforcement of our laws and inviting the governments of their states and communities and the people of the United States to observe such day and week in appropriate ceremonies and activities. Traverse City law enforcement officers, like all law enforcement officers, are guardians to life, property, defenders of individual rights to be free people, warriors in the war against crime, and dedicated to the preservation of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I call upon all of our citizens to make every effort to express their appreciation to our police officers. These men and women make it possible for us to leave our homes and families in safety each day and return to our homes knowing that we are protected by police officers who are willing to sacrifice their lives, if necessary, to guard our loved ones, our property, and our government rights, and our government against all who would violate the law. Therefore, I, Richard I. Lewis, Mayor of the City of Traverse City, proclaim May 14th through the 20th, 2023 as National Police Week and encourage all citizens of our community to honor and show sincere appreciation for the police officers of this great city by deed, remark, and attitude. Captain Richmond. Thank you for your service.
What's that?
Is there a ceremony tomorrow?
It's on Wednesday.
Oh, Wednesday.
Wednesday at 1 o'clock, we'll have our normal yearly ceremony for Police Memorial Week. I just want to say thank you to the commission, city manager, city staff, and our community for the support that you do show law enforcement here. It's a great community, and I've enjoyed my 19 years here in Traverse City. Thank you.
And the police memorial is out in the parking lot here, the governmental
outside
center,
of
right?
the
Right
building
outside
here,
there by the flag.
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
I didn't have names on this other one.
Safe Boating Week.
Next, we have Safe Boating Week. I would like to ask representatives of the Coast Guard Auxiliary to come up. We have Flotilla Commander Richard, I want to look at his name tag again, I can announce it better. LaVenture, thank you. Chief of Staff James Frick, and District Captain Randy Lawton from the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary. Thanks for being with us tonight. Thank you. Okay. I would make fun of Mr. Frick, but he'll get back with me. We've known each other too long, so I got to behave. Not. No. City of Traverse City proclamation declaring May 20th to 26th, 2023 as National Safe Boating Week. Whereas for nearly 100 million Americans, boating continues to be a popular recreational activity from coast to coast and everywhere in between. People take to the water and enjoy time together boating, sailing, paddling, and fishing. During National Safe Boating Week, the U.S. Coast Guard and its federal, state, and local boating partners encourage all boaters to explore and enjoy America's beautiful waters responsibly. And whereas safe boating begins with preparation, the Coast Guard estimates that human error accounts for most boating accidents and that life jackets could have prevented nearly 86% of boating fatalities. Through basic boating safety procedures, carrying life-saving emergency distress and communications equipment, wearing life jackets, attending safe boating courses, participating in free boat safety checks, and staying sober when navigating, we can help ensure boaters on America's coastal, inland, and offshore waters stay safe through the season. And whereas National Safe Boating Week is observed to bring attention to important life-saving tips for recreational boaters so they can have safer, more fun experiences on the water year-round. And whereas on average 600 people die each year in boating-related accidents in the U.S., 79% of these are fatalities caused by drowning. Michigan ranks 7th in the nation for boating accidents and fatalities. And whereas the vast majority of these accidents are caused by human error or poor judgment and not by the boat, equipment, or environmental factors. And whereas a significant number of boaters who lost their lives by drowning this year would be alive today if they had worn their life jackets. Therefore, I, Richard I. Lewis, Mayor of the City of Traverse City, Michigan, do hereby support the goals of the Safe Boating Campaign and the start of the year-round effort to promote safe boating and proclaim May 20th through the 26th, 2023 as National Safe Boating Week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
We appreciate some comments. Thank you, Mr. One
Actually, I was rather surprised. Last week, we were asked to teach safe boating to the United States Coast Guard. That was amazing to me. We taught over at the air station. And for the auxiliaries to be asked to teach the active duty. And we've learned that they have what are called morale boats that they can check out and use for their pleasure. In order to be able to do that, they have to have passed our safe boating course from the auxiliary. So that's a big push that we do every spring, safe boating. You may have seen a lot of ads that we're doing, and we're trying to really get the word out. 75% of boating accidents are due strictly to human error. And as Mayor Lewis said, 86% of fatalities are due to not wearing life jackets. And so we're trying to push life jackets, and we're trying to get, we're doing a big push this year for paddle boarders. We see paddle boarders every time we're out on a patrol. We see paddle boarders out there, and they're on their paddleboard with no personal flotation device, and we'll go and talk to them, and they say, well, I'm tethered to the board. And my response is always, well, that'll make it easier to find your body. When you fall off of the board, hit your head, and you're unconscious in the water. So we really are pushing the life preservers. So that's our spring. We're active all year, but that's our big push. And so we appreciate the proclamation for Safe Boating Week. It just allows us to really, really be more visible and push it. So thank you.
Yep, announcements from the city manager.
Announcements from the city manager.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. The one that I know of is tomorrow night at the Park Place Hotel is a master plan open house from 7 to 9 o'clock p.m. We definitely would encourage residents that have an interest in that process to come out and join us. We talked about the Police Memorial Service, which is Wednesday, down in front of the Government Center. Ms. Hill, is there anything else that I'm missing? No, I think we are set. Thank you.
All right. Announcements from our city clerk.
Yeah, just some meetings to announce for this week. The week of May 15th, the Arts Commission is meeting on Wednesday, May 17th. It'll be at 3:30 p.m. in the committee room, which is located on the second floor of the Governmental Center. The Downtown Development Authority Board of Trustees will meet this Friday, May 19th. That's at 9 a.m. in this room, the Commission Chambers. We're recruiting, as usual, for a number of different boards and committees that we hope folks are interested in perhaps serving on. Anyone interested in serving on any of these is encouraged to contact the city clerk's office to learn more about them and what's involved. But the three that we're currently recruiting for are the Local Officers Compensation Commission, the Election Commission, and the Human Rights Commission. And then we issued a press release today, but of course this November is a city commission election. There's three four-year seats and the mayor's seat that, of course, are up at this November's election. We now have nominating packets, so anyone who's interested in running for those seats can obtain those packets from the city clerk's office, and they're due July 25th at 4 p.m. And then just a kind of fun announcement, actually. We were talking about just this afternoon that this Thursday, May 18th, is Traverse City's 128th birthday. So I'll end with that. That's all that I've got. Thank you.
Will there be cake?
Yes, yeah, right? Where? Who's making it? But there will be cake
Potters.
somehow.
Are you buying?
But there's cake there.
Cake. All right. Consent calendar, please.
Yes, the purpose of the consent calendar is to expedite business by grouping non-controversial items together to be dealt with by one commission motion without discussion. Any member of the commission, staff, or the public can ask that any item on the consent calendar be removed from it and placed elsewhere on the agenda for individual consideration by the commission, and such requests will be automatically respected. If an item is not removed from the consent calendar, the action noted in parentheses on the agenda is approved by a single commission action adopting the consent calendar. Item 1. Consideration of approving the minutes of the May 1st, 2023 meeting of the City Commission. Approval recommended. Item 2, consideration of approving the fiscal year 2023-2024 operating fund budget and long-term general obligation fund budget for the City of Traverse City and Charter Township of Garfield Recreational Authority as required by its bylaws. Approval recommended. Item 3, consideration of authorizing agreements for sewer lead construction in connection with the 100 block East Front Street sewer main project. Approval recommended. Item 4, consideration of authorizing a purchase order for firefighter turnout gear for the fire department. Approval recommended. Item 6, consideration of authorizing a confirming purchase order for diesel fuel for city operational use. Approval recommended. Item 6, consideration of authorizing a one-year agreement for Boardman Lake Loop trail maintenance with the option to renew for up to 2 one-year periods if authorized by the City Commission. Approval recommended. Item 7, consideration of authorizing a blanket purchase order for the purchase of unleaded gasoline and diesel fuel for resale at the Duncan L. Clinch Marina. Approval recommended. Item 8, consideration of authorizing a change order to the contract for the 100 Block North Alley of East Front Street Sanitary Sewer Relocation Project for Protective Pipe Joint System. Approval recommended. Item 9, consideration of authorizing an agreement to the pictometry agreement for extension and participation with Grand Traverse County, and that's for aerial imaging services. Approval recommended. And finally, item 10, consideration of adopting a resolution recognizing the Women's Resource Center as a nonprofit organization within the city, which will allow it to apply for a state of Michigan raffle license. Adoption recommended.
Is there anyone from the commission that would like to have an item removed?
Just a question, not the removal, or actually, it's not even a question, comment about 8, so it's quick. Item 8 is the 100 Block North Alley, the sewer. I support it, but it would be great to at least get a brief memo about the naphthalene contamination, because just at a previous meeting, we paid to have hazardous soil hauled downstate to a hazardous landfill. So to have some sort of memo, here's the update, here's the plume of naphthalene, where might it be coming from? If we know, here were the concentrations, just a little more substance to it would be very helpful. And then that's my request. My comment is that I don't think that item 8 deserves the little symbol indicating that it's helping with climate change.
Okay.
Thank you.
Anyone from the audience like an item removed from the consent calendar? All right. No one, nothing being removed. I'll entertain a motion, please.
I'll make a motion that we accept the consent calendar as presented.
Support.
Okay, we have a motion. We have support. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Thank you. Okay. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move the items under new business up so that we can get all the business items on the agenda off of our agenda, and that way we can spend as much time as we need on the budget and not have to worry about getting the rest of the agenda complete. Okay. The next item under new is consideration of waiving the competitive bidding process to authorize an out-scope agreement for the upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant. I'll turn this over to you or to whomever you want to turn it over to.
Mr. Kruger.
Okay.
Good evening. Art Krieger, Director of Municipal Utilities. This project is coming before you. It's part of our longer-range CIP projects that we've been having in the plan over the last few years. And it is to basically overhaul the critical SCADA, it's a very long acronym, system. It's like the brain of the plant, if you will, and the nervous system, so how things operate and how the operators can monitor different portions of the plant through different processes. And then the PLC replacement is part of this, and those are the programmable logic controllers. So those are basically like the brain of the SCADA system. They do go hand in hand. They are very important. They're like a watchdog system for the wastewater plant. If anything gets out of range, an alarm will sound and operators are aware of it almost immediately, which is very important because timing to react to things is very critical. It's combining 2 CIP projects, and we did trim it down slightly. Instead of doing the entire plant, we're leaving a second phase of changing these systems out in the membrane piece of the plant. So we would like to do that later, another time, bring that back before you. Jacobs is managing the plant, and they have a very good handle on this system. And while things get changed out, there's going to be different processes that have to be shut down and turned back on and still keep the plant running, because basically wastewater comes in 24/7. So that's it in a nutshell. There was probably a little bit more here and there. I do have in the packet, I do have Luke and Mark here from Jacobs if there are any other questions that I can't answer, if you do have any questions. So
I believe that you have a fairly in-depth scope of work that's going to be done there. I did kind of like the analogy, where was it? The central nervous system and brains for the plant operation. Okay. Ignore that phone ring. So anyway. Okay. Do we have any other questions?
Is that your phone?
Yeah, it's my phone.
You want me to turn off the sound?
It's turned off now, and I'm going to go silence it while y'all work
Okay.
it. Does anyone have any more questions? It is a great tune.
It's a good song.
Okay.
Gave us a real sense of urgency.
Any questions from the audience? Yes. Sir, you need to come up to the mic and name and number.
And I'll state the rules for public comment for everyone speaking tonight. Please state your name and address, indicate if you're a city resident, non-city resident, or city business owner. We have a 3-minute time allotment for each person commenting. When your time's elapsed, the timer will beep. And finally, we ask that all language be respectful to everyone. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Dr. Martin Dudziak, and I am Traverse City resident, live at 438 Coughlin Street. And basically, I would just ask for clarification on the rationale for replacing the SCADA instruments. Is it because of malfunctions, or are they considered by perhaps the IT support people to be outmoded, or is there some new mechanism or new technology that requires the update of those components? That's all. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, may I?
I'm going to have,
Yeah,
if it's
while he's
all right.
coming up, if you could also, like in the answer, kind of include in it why it makes sense to waive the competitive bidding process. I personally support that, given what this is, but I don't want to be the one here trying to explain why it makes sense to waive the competitive bidding process for this. But if you could,
Yeah.
That would be fantastic.
If it's
Well,
okay,
let's
I'll do
answer the
that
first question
But
first.
yeah, I think it goes hand in hand with
Yes.
what
Okay.
was asked.
Okay, what, Mark?
Like you said, they're the ones that are there every day. Go ahead.
Mark Huggard, Jacobs. I guess to start with the first question is, yes, it is outdated. This equipment does need to be upgraded.
You need to speak up so we can hear
Excuse
through the
me.
mic, please.
This equipment does need to be updated. Software needs to be updated every so often. The last upgrade was about 10 years ago. Technologies are changing fast, especially in SCADA technologies. Upgrading this SCADA system improves our efficiency, plant efficiency, process efficiency, speed of processors and all that, security, systems security from outside sources, potential dangerous or potential outside attacks, that kind of stuff for security reasons. The PLCs throughout the different facility, like Art said, those are the brains of those processes. So that's through those PLCs. There's they control functions of pumps, valves, and all that equipment. So they over time they need to be replaced. Some of the PLCs that we're replacing are over 20 years old now, so they're well past their due. And
As far as waiving the competitive bid process, I think Jacobs are there every day. They've been operating the plant. They understand the system very, very thoroughly. And to bring in another party to start learning a lot about it is going to take extra time and money and costs. So I'm recommending that we have them do it. They have the power and staff, the horsepower, I should say, in-house to handle the project, and so that was the recommendation. Hopefully that makes sense.
And also, just from a little historical knowledge here, I remember Art, and this was back, I think Commissioner McGillivray asked about it, so before this current commission, that what we found too is that the people who do this, the companies that do this, are buying each other out. So there's really only a couple options anyways, correct? And Jacobs is one of them, and that's why we have our contract with them.
That is true. Companies are buying each other out, but yeah, it kind of limits the
Competitiveness.
playing field in a way to choose from. And there would be a lot of coordination from, say, an outside vendor with the operations. And in this case, we just let them handle it together as a package deal, and it just has a better chance for success, I believe.
All I can do is just read one line from the SCADA update. The SCADA system communicates 24/7 with all plant programmable logic controllers, which are PLC, which provides the operators monitoring and controlling all plant processes from one central location. It provides for critical alarm capabilities, historical data storage processes, control tending, and secure remote access. And a PLC is a programmable computer with multiple inputs and outputs that control plant equipment and processes based on custom programming for our plant. I could run one of those. No. So that's kind of what we're trying to get to make sure it runs well. And the beauty of it is if they're at home and the alarm goes off, they wake up and they can deal with it from their iPhones or their computers at home. So that's the beauty of it. Okay, thanks.
I'd like to make the motion,
Okay.
if that's all right with everybody. I move that the competitive bidding process be waived and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to execute a contract with Jacobs in an amount not to exceed $726,500 for the upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant supervisory control and data acquisition system and programmable logic controllers. Such contract subject as to its substance by the interim city manager and its form by the city attorney with funds available in the sewer fund.
Support.
Motion support. Is there any other comments from the audience? Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Thank you. And also in the packet, if you want, there is a very detailed scope of work that if you wanted to go online and read the packet, you can do that also, sir. Okay. Next is a consideration of adopting a resolution scheduling a public hearing regarding a request for a special improvement district for an alley north of East Front Street between Peninsula Drive and North Garfield Avenue. So you can see this is in here. I don't know who we turned this over tonight.
Ms. Karen?
Okay. Oh, there he is. Okay, I didn't see you over there. I apologize.
Hiding. Polly Karen, City Assessor.
Okay.
So it was a SID request that was received of engineering, and I created the spread, and we have sent that out for petitions. They did survey numerous owners, and we have also, through our department, we have sent the survey cards out so we get those responses back for the June 19th meeting, and I can bring those forward to the commission at that time.
Okay. As it relates that if 51% though is historic, if 51% of the folks
Is needed.
say yes, then we'll usually move forward with it. But we haven't got the results of the survey.
Not all
All
the
we're
cards.
doing tonight is scheduling the public hearing. We're
This is
not
just the
making ultimate
introduction, correct.
decisions. So that's all we're doing. Okay. I would be glad to entertain a motion to start that.
I will make the recommendation that the scheduling of a public hearing on Special Improvement District 2022-002B be adopted, scheduling the public hearing for June 19th, 2023.
Motion?
Support.
Support? Okay. Anyone from the audience like to add anything? Any questions from the commission?
I'm just wondering how many households this includes?
14?
14?
14 property
14
owners.
properties.
14
Yeah, it's on the north side of Front Street, back behind the new condos, and on the south side of the church, down that little alley back there.
So we had information that 14 people had signed the petition, is that correct? Or that 14 people could sign the petition?
Up to
Good.
14 people are in this group.
Up to,
of
because we know at
groups.
least one
Mhm.
does not. Okay,
Yes.
great, thank you.
We have received several cards back, but not all of them yet.
I
So I'll
see.
put a spreadsheet together for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Good, thank you. Okay. All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Okay. Next one, we'll go ahead and get this out of the way, is that we would we would like to enter into a closed session to consider a material exempt from discussion by state and federal statute. It's a client-attorney communication, and there is a motion to go into closed session at the end of the meeting, after we have public comment. Glad to entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion that the city commission enter to closed session immediately following, the public comment portion of the agenda to discuss an attorney-client communication as authorized by MCL 15.268, subsection H.
Support?
Support.
Okay, we have a motion and support. Okay, all those in
Ro-
favor?
We have a roll call vote.
Oh, we have to have a roll call.
Yes, and I'll start with Commissioner Werner,
Sure.
Mayor Pro Tem Shamro,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilson,
Yes.
Commissioner Stanley,
Yes.
Commissioner Treadwell,
Yes.
Commissioner Colbert,
Yes.
and Mayor Lewis.
Yes. And last but not least, we'll go ahead and just take care of the appointments. We had a Brown Bridge Advisory Committee made up of, let me get to my, come up. Made up of Commissioner Treadwell, Commissioner Wilson, and Commissioner Colbert. And who was the chair of that committee?
I suppose I was.
Okay. Would you like to give your report, sir, of the committee?
Well, we had interviews. Due to scheduling, we had to schedule them, spread them out over 2 days, 2 non-consecutive days, so that made it a little trickier, but we still managed to interview all candidates and decided to narrow it down to some people that we felt collectively were good people, that they had a commitment to keeping Brown Bridge quiet area the great public park that it is, that they had all personal connections to the area, whether they live near there or frequently visit there, and are looking forward to keeping that humming along.
Would you like to make make the suggested motion?
I will. That the appointments to the Brown Bridge Advisory Committee of Jamie Kidwell Bricks to a term expiring October 6, 2025, seat previously held by Jamie Kidwell Bricks, Judy Nimitz to the term expiring October 6, 2025, seat previously held by Nelson Asper, James Kerr to the term expiring October 6, 2025, seat previously held by Kathleen Kasdorf, Jacqueline Andres to the term expiring October 6, 2025, seat previously held by Michael Vickery, as recommended by the ad hoc committee consisting of Commissioner Treadwell, Commissioner Wilson, and Commissioner Colbert, be approved.
I'll support that. And as somebody who previously sat on, I'd also like to say I know Nelson Asper served quite a while on that and was very formative in shaping it to what it is today. So I just wanted to thank him as well as the others who are signing off. But I know he had quite a long haul on there and did a lot of work. So.
Right, we have a motion and a second. Is there anyone from the audience that have any comments? Okay. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion passes. Okay, we'll take this back up to our old business, which is the budget. Our budget. I'm just going to let everyone know that at about 9:30, regardless of where we are, I'll try to wrap our discussion for tonight up, and so that we have time to go into closed session. So, just giving everybody a heads up. So, with that, I'll turn this over to you, sir.
All right, thank you again, Mr. Mayor and City Commission. I'm going to save most of my comments for when, after the DDA and Traverse City Light and Power get a chance to do their presentation. I think the theme this evening, especially for, well, most of the presentations, except for maybe Power and Light, is transition. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when I go up there. At this point in time, I think we are starting with Traverse City Light and Power.
Good evening, Carla Myers-Beeman, Traverse City Light and Power, Chief Financial Officer. So I'll start. Just our vision and mission statement, our board, and our team. Just some kind of fun facts. We have 12,969 meters. We've been in operation for 111 years. Our demand megawatts was 66.11 last year, and we have 43 employees as of March 2023, and we have 452 miles of overhead and underground lines. So we'll start off with utility sales compared to purchase power. In this graph, we always want to see our utility sales follow our purchase power costs because of our power service cost recovery rate. So it's a variable rate to make the utility whole. So as our purchase power costs increase, that is passed on to the customer. However, vice versa happens too. As our purchase power costs decrease, that savings is passed on to the customer. In 22-23, we were impacted by the natural gas market. The Ukrainian war happened, which decreased supply to Europe, increased prices, made it very favorable for the United States to export LNG to Europe. Also, coming out of COVID-19, the demand, or during COVID-19, the demand for natural gas production decreased. And so that pushed maintenance out for natural gas plants and reducing the overall supply. Demand increased significantly as we came out of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the natural gas production couldn't keep up with demand, causing an increase in prices. Also, this year we had expected harsher winter, so higher prices were expected in December, January, and February. It ended up actually being a milder winter, and natural gas storage was actually placed in storage. And so you'll see that price for electricity has come down since the winter months and seem to decrease over the next year. Just to kind of talk a little bit about Smart Grid. This is a chart showing our customer increase from 2020 to 2022 over 2 years. One thing I didn't really, I think, stress during the USDA financing meeting is this really serves as a dual purpose asset for us. For the electric fund, it will improve reliability and security of supply. It also provides tools to our customers for savings, and it will help us do a cleaner, greener planet for future generations, while also providing broadband services and VoIP services to our customers. So here's some of our purchase power. This is solar and wind energy. Our largest solar project is in energy that just came online at the end of April, so that's exciting. It's the 25,424 megawatt hours. We have 2 wind projects with DTE Stony Corners being the largest project. Combined, this brings in 29.5% of renewable generation in the upcoming budget year for Traverse City Light and Power. So this slide just shows our cost per megawatt hour by project. I've kind of already touched on what should be the wholesale cost of power, the increased costs in bilateral contracts, and market. Bell River, you will see it increase that in 23-24. It's going to be lesser generation to spread that cost across. Additionally, it's going to be shut down for a couple months for a turbine blade replacement. And then also they're making transmission upgrades related to that project. In the natural gas section for the CT, which is located in Kalkaska, if you look at the budget, the overall cost has increased, but the megawatt hour, the dollar per megawatt hour has decreased. And that's due to, it's expected to operate more. We're moving it from a peaking emission permit to a low emission permit, so it'll generate more. We also had to have recoupment of costs. The engine had to be rebuilt this summer, so that's increased the overall cost of it. Additionally, with increased generation, we have increased operating expenses. So that's kind of the price fluctuations from projected to budget. Everything else remains relatively stable and same. So this slide just shows us our megawatt hour comparison by project, so how much generation we get from coal, or from Campbell, Bell River, and renewables. So I think the best takeaway from this is our green, which is the renewables, and it keeps growing, which is exciting. So our renewable resources for the 23-24 budget year is 32.81% when you take in consideration solar, landfill, and wind. And so we're on our way to meet our goal of 40% by 2025. The next slide is operating expenses. In this graph, you'll see that operating expenses are increasing. This is attributed to increasing number of employees by 4, adding an electric system operator, environmental safe health coordinator, customer service position, and electrical engineer. Additionally, with fringe benefits, our MERS portfolio lost $3 million at the end of the fiscal year. So that's going to have to be amortized over the next 4 years. And so that increased our retirement costs. It's not an outlay of cash right now, but it's the amortization of expense. We also had an increase in professional development, an increase of 61%, so we're really investing in our employees. We're also taking a little bit different approach to tree trimming, so you'll see an increase in tree trimming costs under the distribution and transmission department. We also had our first full year, or will have our first full year of software costs relating to the utility billing software, which was increase in cost over the previous software application. We also have a new decarbonization plan that's really replacing the energy waste reduction program that was primarily rebates. This will be overall encompassing of all our strategies that Brandy will talk about with the climate action plan. And the energy waste reduction plan was also embedded with the employee costs, so we have removed that, so we have a little bit more purchasing power with the decarbonization plan, and we plan to increase that in future years. We also have some one-time expenses relating to a TCLP Tomorrow project, customer service gap study, and solar generation feasibility study. It's all budgeted in the upcoming year. Additionally, based on results from customer surveys, we have absorbed credit card fees for residential and commercial customers. Those costs are kind of on the conservative side, but we have included those in the projection and budget. So this is our capital plan. You can see for the past 10 years, we've really invested into our system to ensure its reliability. We've done 2 substations, various transmission lines, various distribution rebuilds. We've done AMI. We've also built out phase 1 and phase 1.1. For the next 5 fiscal years, the big thing is the blue bars. Those represents the USDA financing for phase 2. So those are our upcoming projects. So this slide is just information on employees. As I mentioned, the employee count increased by 4. On the bottom left-hand side, TCLP has been accelerating its pension contributions for quite a few years. We expect to be 100% funded by year 2031, and at that time, our pension costs will significantly decrease, as you can see in the graph. So this is a rate comparison. TCLP staff does this every 2 years. This is actually from the Energy Information Administration. They accumulate the data from all the utilities, and on top of that, staff does the rate analysis based on rate class, so residential, commercial demand, and industrial. That's due this year, so we'll get that done this summer and fall, but as you can see, overall, City of Traverse City, based on this year, is still relatively low compared to other utilities for its retail rate. And this is just another, what I'd say, fun slide. So this is kind of where does the money go? So every dollar of the utility dollar paid to the utility, the majority goes to generation costs, and then following with distribution and transmission operations, and then depreciation, change in net assets, which is really just our capital investment back into the system. And with that, I will turn it over to Brandy.
Thank you, Carla. Hi, Brandy Akron, Executive Director for Traverse City Light and Power. I appreciate you allowing me to slide in a few slides about our climate action plan. Last year, around this time when we did our budget update, I switched and changed the nuances of our integrated resource plan, and we switched it to more of a climate action plan. And it's really focused on a couple different key pieces. The one was really, I guess, one, how are we measuring our success? That's the key piece. The second is having that broader role. What's the role of the utility as the energy provider? And then how are we bringing our customers along? If you recall, in our climate action plan, the core piece is that integrated resource plan. The ultimate goal is what normal utilities do with a 20-year outlook of looking at how am I going to serve my customer base based on the resources that I have. What takes into account or goes into that also is those various technologies such as demand response, energy efficiency, things that we're used to seeing today. The other piece deals with programs. What's the regulatory environment at play? We're calling it a climate action plan in lieu of just an IRP, predominantly because we want to focus on to what end in mind. How do we start evolving our role as a utility? How do we start transitioning from just doing ordinary energy planning to evolving that business model? And so what we have transitioned, I guess, over the past year or so is when we went out for RFP, we looked at about 7 different approaches. We looked at decarbonization, we looked at our energy portfolio mix, which Carlo just went through very diligently and thoroughly, demand response programs, energy efficiency or energy waste reduction. Some of us know it a little bit more familiarly as the rebate program. Distributed energy resources, customer-owned solar, and then looking at energy storage. It was one of our big investments over the past year. We've got an opportunity to actually invest in some storage technology. And so we took those technologies, started doing some research, did a third-party survey, as well as been working on our customer engagement. And what we've come away from is that we take those, I say, 6 key items and focus on moving towards that measurable planet impact, which is decarbonization. Now, all greenhouse gases are offensive to the environment and to the planet. Decarbonization has to be, right now, one of the more common measurable pieces that we can measure. And with our IRP modeling, not only are we looking at that decarbonization impact, but we are looking at the costs associated with it. What are those societal impact components? But most specifically right now, we're focused on decarbonization. That's the trend. So being able to leverage our portfolio investment, our demand response programs, and I'll talk a little bit about that, energy waste reduction, beneficial electrification, how are we getting electric ready? All of those things need to be moving towards decarbonization. That's how you are applying them, you knowing whether or not you're effective. One of the biggest pieces that we've learned over the past year is that in order for any of that to be successful, we had to start implementing concerted efforts in public education. Another word is community literacy. That was the key takeaway. Customers are very interested, definitely in the technology, but they wanted us to help bring them along. So what we started to do now is wrap that into that framework for the Climate Action Plan and decarbonization. And when we started on this journey, and this is before I got here last year, the utility had already had a 100% renewable goal by or before 2040. Being able to model it with the IRP shows us a pathway for being able to get that, and then maybe set a couple additional goals along the way. The slide right here shows that goal, that framework. It also highlights one of our really proud designations we won this past year, which is that Smart Energy Provider designation. If I recall, I think we're like maybe one of 3 utilities in the state that actually has that designation. Lansing Board of Water and Light, my previous employer, happens to be the other one of those 3, as well as Holland. So let's talk about decarbonization. So we've talked about the various strategies, and the reason why I want to focus on decarbonization is predominantly to really focus on it from the perspective of what does Traverse City Light and Power have control over, and what does Traverse Light and Power have the opportunity to influence. And so one of the key pieces that we talked about, which is those portfolio investments, that's one way to set a decarbonization goal, which we will be recommending in June to our board. Right now, what I'm looking at is, in addition to having that 100% renewable goal by or before 2040, I'd like to be able to have a carbon-free goal by or before 2040, so that we can start measuring the impact of those investments as we move along. The other piece deals with our operations. How are we operating? Looking at not only our building footprint, but how are we operating our fleet? How are we looking at just ordinary things that you do in the kitchen as far as just basic operations? And we'd like to maybe set, we're looking at setting a net zero goal of net zero by 2025 is what I'm looking at, and then a carbon-free goal by 2030 or 2040. I gotta check with Carla. But the idea behind that is, as we are leading, in my perspective, if we want to bring our customers along on that electric readiness journey and impact journey, we can start with ourselves. And this is an excellent opportunity to be able to do that. And so those are things that are definitely within our control, that we can influence. And the readiness and the impact of that is obviously going to be based on what's going on in the market, whether or not, we've got nice sedan vehicles and trucks that are EVs, but those utility vehicles aren't quite there just yet. But it isn't going to impact us being able to still set a goal and kind of work towards it. The next piece, which I think is probably where the utility is starting to expand its role, is where can we influence and develop that strategy? What I envision is that Light and Power being able to work with our community partners like the city in setting decarbonization goals, and not only setting the goal, but being able to lay out some pathways and tactics that allow our partners to be able to accomplish that in measurable fashions. Decarbonization goal and strategies are different per entity, per customer, per individual, per household, but being able to be a resource to show and communicate that, I think will really be able to move our community forward. And again, I'm lumping that in the category of influence and encourage. The next two slides is really kind of getting towards what I would say, what is that broader role? So this slide, and quite frankly, both of these slides, this one right here, as well as this one, to some extent overlap. This first one, I'd like to say, being able to look at that forest in addition to the trees, focuses on how are we transitioning away from what a utility normally does. And here are at least 5 programs or 5 program strategies where I feel like we have an opportunity to do that. Again, this is zooming out. So looking at it from how do we optimize the energy that we're using and bringing our customers along with that. The key piece right now is that building envelope. We've talked about going all electric. We've talked about electric readiness. But perhaps it's time for the utility to start lumping in its rebate program and its education programs to help getting and attracting that building envelope. And that's something that we're exploring, definitely with our consultants. Energy efficiency and energy waste reduction will always continue to be a part of the discussion and part of the mix. But one of the key pieces, and the reason why it's mentioned here, is because what we'd like to be able to do is have these things, if the right word is talk to each other, but be able to connect with one another. So how does those light bulbs, how does the insulation, how is that helping with the building envelope? The other piece, which is I think is a new opportunity to explore, and what we are looking at doing is just really exploring the opportunity. Perhaps it's time for us to see what does district heating and cooling look like for dense populated areas. Now, that would clearly be a collaborative opportunity between Light and Power and the city, but it's something that's definitely worth exploring. We explored it downstate at my previous utility, but my previous utility had water as well as electric. And if we are looking to impact what goes on in that heating season, this is a really good, another alternative way to do that. How do we leverage that water, so to speak, with being able to heat in addition to the electricity? Demand response is an interesting, I would say, concept. And I say it's interesting because it's really not new. We have time of use rates, but at the end of the day, it's all about human behavior. When we did a customer survey and got feedback from customers on demand response programs, we talked about controlled thermostats, being able to have your utility send pricing signals. And the key piece that came away was that customers were not ready for anyone to control anything just yet. However, there still is a role and there is an opportunity for demand response. Time of use rates is that one piece, and if being able to influence that human behavior is that educational component I talked about that's at the back end, we think it's very much key. And so being able to focus a little bit more on that demand response, at least inching towards that, is where we think is going to move us into the future. BTM just means behind the meter. Solar and storage. So customers being able to generate their own power with rooftop solar or some other type of technology. The reason why this is particularly valuable for Light and Power is, and this is where it's, I would say, is unique from a lot of utilities, is that Traverse City Light and Power is what's considered a transmission customer. We invest in an energy portfolio, but we're not a generation owner. We invest in generation, but when it comes to the energy planning, we actually have an opportunity to figure out how to partner with our customers on programs and their own generation to help us with how we procure for their energy need. We talk about our net metering program recently. This is an opportunity to take it to a little bit more of a partnership between us and the customer with planning. Utilities that are not network customers, that are point to point, that are generation owners, most investor-owned utilities, so to speak, this does not have the same value for them, and it's not because it's a matter of methodology or philosophy or whether or not they care for it or not. It doesn't have the same value, predominantly because they own their own generation. We don't, so why not leverage it? And so that's the opportunity there. Now, there's a lot going on. There's a multitude of things, a lot of technology that is out there, as well as programs. And so one of the key pieces with this next component is, what is the ease to engage? How do we make it easier? I always say when you're looking at a website, I want to know how do you minimize the number of clicks before you get something. So what's the minimal number of clicks to get a customer to be moving towards that decarbonization goal? And so what we've identified right now is being able to still have rebate programs, but rebate programs that kind of talk to each other. We talked about that a little bit in that first slide, and that's really what those rebates are. How do we incentivize and get a rebate that's tied to whether or not a customer's on a time of use rate? How do we tie a rebate for an electric charger when someone is charging their electric vehicle during a certain time of day? And so that's what we mean by rebates. Rebates are also really good because if they can have the opportunity to, what I would say, close that margin of decision. So if a customer is making a decision between a more efficient appliance, how can we close that gap so that we minimize how much money is an issue? And that's something that we're exploring right now. The opportunity to have an energy coach, it might be called something different. I think we've changed the title of it over the past year or so, but energy coaches is what's sticking to mind lately. And in essence, the energy coach, and this is where we think our role is in addition to helping our community partners, residential and commercial partners, how are we able to help walk customers through that abundant amount of rebates and dollars that are out there? How do we connect them together? Well, we're not looking at being the instrument to help them get those grant fundings and those rebates that are available across the nation, but there is an opportunity for us to be a good source of information to help. And that's part of the energy coaching piece. The other piece is being able to consult with our key customers, whether they're commercial customers, large or so, but being able to help coach them as well. A commercial kitchen is something that one of the example of a great program we thought would be really good. I think my husband could benefit from this training to illustrate that you can cook not on gas. And so we think there's an opportunity maybe to pair up with the local college and start doing a little bit of demonstrations in terms of how can you make electric cooking working great. We talked about induction stoves, and just showing some demonstrations and getting people more involved. My husband will be signing up, by the way. And then contractor engagement and programs. So this goes back to that building envelope. During our stakeholder engagement, we had some really great HVAC partners that kind of showed up to that discussion, and they want to come along. We have customers that are already all electric homes, and now they have done it as an early adopter, and they're more than happy to share their journey and their story. But one of the key pieces when it comes to that electric readiness, that building envelope, is how do we get contractors, access in the same have the same access to the knowledge in terms of installation, repair, and our thought is that let's kind of cross the aisle and kind of help them along the way. So we do have a couple, I think, partners that are already very much interested in doing something like that, and we think that would enrich that customer experience. Again, the idea behind these 5 items, and we'll likely probably roll out a little bit more programs in way more detail, but it's that ease to engage. So if a customer is willing to move towards a decarbonization goal and a strategy, how are we helping them afford it? How are we helping them understand what makes sense? And then how are we able to make certain they kind of have those connections along the way? This next slide is the smart grid visualized. Mr. Kruger talked a bit about the SCADA system, and I was really happy to be able to sit in on that. One of the key pieces, because we talk about broadband and TCOP fiber a lot when it comes to smart grid, but in order for any of those programs to work, there's 2 major pieces that has to happen. It's data and communications. And so being able to invest and an intelligent and a resilient electrical grid involves all of these compartments. Being able to work on substation automation. These are things that are very much possible with our fiber investment. Being able to leverage those communications between customers that are doing those DERs, or distributed energy resources, having distribution automation, very similar to what Mr. Kruger was talking about, but on the electric side. And then the smart meters, and then of course that broadband. TCOP fiber is a nice revenue diversification opportunity that can happen, but even if we didn't have TCOP fiber, we would still be making this investment because we cannot be able to move forward in the way we want to move forward without data and communications, and definitely a system that's very intelligent as well as resilient. This slide right here, I'm not going to go through a lot of the details, but what it does show you is here are the 3 pieces that are part of the smart grid that has already been rolled out thus far. We've already rolled out smart meters. We have minimal employees that go to actually read a meter. Being able to reconnect a customer, we're able to do that remotely. There still are a couple that we got to go out to, but for the most part, it allows for a nice quick turnaround once somebody either pays a bill if they've been turned off, or an opportunity to kind of monitor in granularity that activity and be able to help them with that energy coaching. The customer portal was launched in 2021 for residential and commercial customers as an opportunity here to educate them as we've kind of updated our website. And then those time of use rates. We launched that in 21 as well, and our goal is being able to really kick that up a notch from a voluntary perspective first. We don't plan on doing it mandatory, but eventually, as customers become ready, we'll probably make that transition. But we do need to market it a little bit. Carla already kind of touched on some of the key pieces that are, how do we transition to allow these really great ideas and programs? And a lot of it is being able to make certain that our employees are future ready, skill sets are there, being able to make certain that we're managing our cost as a cost of service, so we'll continue to do that. That customer experience is very critical and important, and so we do envision doing a gap analysis on that just to make certain that we're doing what we need to do in accordance with the industry. And the other piece is being able to focus more attention on our marketing, our communication efforts. And that was a lot, and I'm sorry if I went like super fast, but I wanted to save you from the 20 slides that my board went through last week.
They're really great, though. You can check out our packet from last week if you want to see more.
Yes, and there's a memo.
Thank you, Brandy, for that update. I've been kind of waiting for that for some time now. Thank you very much. I still don't understand it all, but I know it's moving forward. That's a great.
It's part of the journey. We'll get it done.
This is good.
She makes it very understandable. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're smarter than I am.
Well, yeah.
It's a smart grid.
It's a smart grid.
I know to turn the ringer off on my phone.
Ooh. Okay, so any questions for me? No?
She's like, I gotta get out of this.
Okay. All right. Is there anything else from Light and Power? Do you have any questions here from the board as it relates to their proposed budget?
I'm just so impressed.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So impressed with your presentation because I am a person whose eyes like to roll back in their head with this kind of stuff, and I'm completely engaged and much more knowledgeable now. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
I am excited with everything that you're doing and have done. I'm sure I could have asked Amy or Tim or Brandy at any point over the last year and a half, but I am curious in the rate comparison chart showing us at near the top of the chart for the lowest rates, and what is the primary factor that or set of factors that determines that? Because I can see, say, Upper Peninsula companies generally having more expensive rates, and maybe the cost of distribution up there is higher, but then City of Lansing is also relatively high.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to update that study this year just to see exactly where we're still high. We actually may be even lower than the third lowest. In terms of what goes into that analysis, Carla, do you want to share a little bit on that? Carla's the pro.
So it's really the cost of service study is made up of your distribution, transmission, operation costs, along with your generation. So in the UP, they're far spread. They have a lot of tree trimming costs, if they want to maintain the reliability. So if they have a lot more outages, that's going to increase their expenses to recoup that cost. City of Lansing, I think they probably have a little bit higher distribution and transmission costs. We're really condensed in 8 square miles, and that really benefits us with our costs. So hopefully that.
Yep. Thank
Hopefully
you.
that explains.
Thank you. Okay,
Mr. Mayor?
I'm good.
Just-
Anybody else got any questions?
Well, it wasn't a question, but I wanted to commend you and your team for making the investment in your professional development to really be putting resources into the staff that you have to attract and retain talent. That's something I'm very happy to see happening within our community and specifically with our public utility and hopefully moving forward with our city as well. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Thank you. The board had a nice vote of confidence, so I appreciate their support.
Ms. Drenzi?
Our other component unit?
Tagging out.
I don't have music, as was the joke earlier.
Yeah, I'm serious.
So I'm just going to go through high level. You have the budget in your packet for the DDA. It's in your budget packet, I believe. And as you know, the DDA board is a 12-member board with the city mayor being one of the members and all being appointed by the city commission. We do have a student liaison, which is the second year of the student liaison, and he is a senior this year, so we will be looking for the third liaison next year as well. Brings valuable insight into the DDA and into county or city government relative to the youth and next generation for our city. The budgets for the DDA, as you know, we have 2 TIF budgets that we are responsible for, which is the Old Town TIF as well as TIF 97. We have 3 contract services that we manage. One is the parking component for the city of Traverse City. It's not just for the downtown. It is for the city as a whole. We recommend to the city commission the parking budget as a whole. The other is the Downtown Association, which is the merchant association. That too does not follow the DDA district. That goes beyond our district. It goes to West Front Street down to Slabtown and up to Rose Street. And so that's a larger business association that we manage. And that is our marketing and communication and events for downtown. And then we manage the city's art commission as well. And we are recommending that budget to you and put that budget together. So the TIF 97 in Old Town, just to remind everyone where the TIF districts are, we tried to highlight the TIF 97 in green, in Old Town in brown. The TIF 97 is the larger TIF district. It starts at the entrance of downtown on East Front Street. It goes and encompasses the open space and goes down to Gillis Street, which is right around North Peak, and comes up and follows the river up to 8th Street. Old Town is basically starts on where Union Street Bridge and comes down to 8th Street and encompasses that area as well. And that is the area that we are responsible for the DDA district and the 2 TIF plans that we're responsible for. The 2 TIF plans that we have 3 shared services across both districts. And the first is the service agreement with the City of Traverse City. This is the first year for that service agreement. And that came out of the Moving Downtown Forward plan. And the service agreement was basically identified as best practices between the DDA and the City of Traverse City to really identify what the city would be doing and what the DDA should be doing. So the base level is based on what the DDA has improved upon, the city services has increased. So we're looking at the increased cost and paying the city for the increased services. So that would be additional street sweeping, additional cost for police service. So we received cost from DPS, city engineering, and police, and we looked at what the cost would be for some of the fire as well. And that's how we started the negotiations between the DDA and the city administration relative to what those service agreements would be. For this year, for TIF 97, it's $677,743, and for Old Town, it's $122,311. The other piece for maintenance and operation, that's the cost that the DDA will be doing above and beyond what the city can do. So those would be, think of sidewalk cleaning, sidewalk washing, flowers, and cleanup of the downtown district that the city cannot get to because of the added need for the downtown cost. The Traverse Connect, this is the third year we're entering into an agreement with Traverse, third or fourth year for Traverse Connect, and that is for business recruitment and retention. And that is a total of $40,000, and we split that between the two TIF plans. For TIF 97, as you can see, is $35,000, and Old Town is $5,000. For Old Town, I'll start with, and this is on page 143 and 144 of the budget packet for you. The public infrastructure projects that I've highlighted here is for the Midtown Riverwalk upgrade. That Riverwalk we had in our budget last year. We were not able to get to that project, but we're hoping that we can start the reconstruction of that. That's similar to the Riverwalk for the Boardman Lake Loop and continuing down on that material that we're looking at. Hannah Park improvements has been identified both from the Lower Boardman as well as with the bridge improvements that we have, the ability to really have a better opportunity on the street side to get down to Hannah Park. Those costs we've identified as $70,000 for, we don't have the total cost, but that's what's in our budget at this time. The Action and Mobility Plan, as you will recall, the DDA and the City of Traverse City split the cost for a mobility and action plan. That would be tied to the master plan itself. Both for the TIF 97 and Old Town, I put some dollars in there for possible implementation of some recommendations from that mobility plan. Streetscape and improvements for Old Town, I'm looking at $100,000, just for improvements for the sidewalk and pedestrian experience in the Old Town area. And then the biggest expense that we have this year is also the 8th Street intersection improvements on Cass and Union, working with DPS and city engineering last year. We've identified these two intersections as needing upgrades and repair significantly for this area of downtown. And then I can pause if there's any questions on Old Town, but I'm going to be going into TIF 97 if there's no questions for Old Town.
I would go on. We'll just do the questions when we get done.
For TIF 97, it's on page 140 to 142 in your budget packet. The design and engineering services for the Lower Boardman Ottaway and the West End parking structure. That is $500,000 for each of those projects. We just went in front of you on April 24th relative to the RFP process, and we anticipate that that RFP will be out this week and that the contract recommendation would be coming back to you sometime in July. Other public infrastructure projects that I want to highlight on TIF 97 is the two-way pilot project on State Street. We do have dollars set aside for I would say improvements, or as we move through some data, what are some changes that we need to make for that pilot project on State Street. The TART Trail extension, this was a question that came relative to what would TIF 97 do if we put dollars into the TART Trail extension. Currently, we we entered into a contract with the city and TART to do an engineering and design for the TART Trail. Our cost would be from Front Street, at the entrance of Front Street by Delamar to Hall Street. So that's our section that we could put some dollars into a potential TART Trail extension. Again, as I indicated in Old Town, for the mobility plan implementation, I'm also putting $50,000 for that component if there's opportunity for implementation. So we wanted to be able to always put some dollars in for implementation. If we have a study, let's try to implement some of those components within that study. Streetscape improvement, again, this is snow melt system and improvements to the sidewalk. And this is something that when Brandy identified in her climate and action plan, she said heating and cooling for feasibility. We're hoping that we could work with Light and Power on a feasibility for a snow melt system for downtown. So that you'll be hearing more of that as we work through some of the feasibility components. And then the downtown composting program, the City of Traverse City has a composting unit that you just received. We really wanted to start identifying how in downtown we can get a robust composting system for all of the restaurants we have, as well as some of other components in the residential areas as well. Professional services for TIF 97, I want to highlight the community policing officer. This is the fourth year that we will be having a community policing officer, and this would be the first year that we will be funding that officer full-time. This has been a very successful program for downtown. When we first initiated this was just part-time, and the connections that are made with the businesses, the community, and the residents that have an impact for this program has been an amazing asset for our community to have a community officer for downtown. And then this is the final year that I wanted just to highlight, the final year that we'll be paying Light and Power for the downtown Wi-Fi. So Light and Power worked with Traverse City Downtown Development Authority to put in a Wi-Fi system, and this is the final year for that reimbursement to Light and Power. And then I want to move to parking, the recommendation, and highlight some of the parking components. And I can turn that over to Nicole as our Transportation and Mobility Director.
Good evening, Commissioners. Nicole Vaness, Transportation Mobility Director. As we work into the parking budget, there are 3 areas that roll into the whole enterprise fund. We have parking general, which covers the residential areas, Munson, areas that are not within the DDA district. We have Hardy, which is all revenues from the Hardy parking structure, and Old Town, which is from the revenues from the Old Town parking structure. Within the revenue, the total operating, we have 4 major contributors to the revenue. One is the parking deck proceeds, which are your hourly admissions, parking fees and from coin, so your parking meters on the streets or in the parking lots, permits specific to surface lots or to garage permits, and then parking fines. Within the general parking fund, there are 3 contributors, which are the meters, permits, and fines. Within Hardy, we have admissions, permits. We do anticipate starting with the rent back from the Scalawags retail space. Schmidt Rogers is currently working on vacating that space, so that is something we're looking to pull back into Hardy. And then for Old Town, it's strictly admissions and permits. So with the expenses, we do have 3 items that we're looking at having for repairs. The first is the Lot T patchwork. This lot was identified as surplus or being talked about at one point. It's not clearly for sale at this time, but it is a location that we know is potentially being looked at. And so with that case, versus going through the full reconstruction of the lot, we're just looking at doing a patch and fill, which means that we're going to cut out the major potholes and make sure that we get them nice and smooth and filled in to continue operating as a parking lot. The next would be to infill the curb cuts in Lot G, so that's something that we have control over, owning that lot as the city. So that follows our local zoning and where we do infill the curb cuts. That'll also help with safety for anybody who's passing by. There'll be less vehicle, pedestrian, or vehicle and bicycle conflicts, having 2 access points in and out of that lot. Next is the Lot C resurfacing. Those of you that have been on the commission for a while might have remembered that Commissioner McGillivray pulled this item when we first entered into COVID in order to reduce the expenses in the parking budget. We have since kicked that can down the road. This is the first year we're going to pick back up and go through that resurfacing. So it will be a complete mill, and then we'll make sure we have a nice top coat to make it nice and smooth. So those are the maintenance projects that we're doing within the parking general. For the Old Town parking structure and the Hardy parking structure, we do have some leaking seals on some windows that has also caused, water damage with the paint on the interior, as well as just some old accumulated dust in the crevices. So we're going to work on refreshing those towers, so those that are entering and exiting, it's a more cleanly experience. And then also the fixing the windows so that way we don't have any future water damage. Over the next year, we will be working with with the RFP and a consultant to do the 5-year restoration. We complete this process every 5 years in order to see where we are. For the most part, our maintenance staff does a good job with day-to-day and routine maintenance, so we've had relatively low expenses. Hardy is going to celebrate its 20th birthday this June, so we do anticipate. Richard, yes, 20 years.
Will there be cake?
Yeah, will there be cake? So we do anticipate that we are nearing the point when Hardy will have some more increased costs as it repairs, especially, we've got a brick facade, so there could be some tuck points and other items that need to be reworked. So within that 5-year restoration, we are going to look at having that projected out so we can get a better idea of those more costly expenses that are kind of creeping up. Old Town is not quite as old, so we do have some time there. And then the largest piece of our budget is the professional contractual. Information technology is not displayed here, but that is included as a recurring cost from software that we have with our vendors. So one of the new items that we're introducing this year and recommending is a reduction to the city fee. So in the past, this enterprise fund for parking has always contributed 10% to the city fee. All other enterprise funds in the city do 5%. And so we're looking towards requesting that the parking fund also contribute 5%. The reason for that is, again, I mentioned the aging cost of the facilities. And so in order to retain some surplus funds for future repairs, we just want to make sure that we can retain those fees. So a little history on how we got to the 10%. Prior to 2009, there used to be a very strenuous reconciliation process as it relates to revenues outside of the DDA. So the city fee was really contributed to any citations issued or any revenues collected that were not in the DDA district. In 2009, those that were currently at the DDA and at the city looked at the operating revenues and realized that what was contributed outside of the DDA was roughly 10% of the total revenues. And so in order to clean up some of the reconciliation, make it easier for reporting, it was determined that 10% would be the amount. So since then, Old Town structure opened and has come online. We our office, the Parking Services, has become the sole source for generating and preparing notice letters. We've responded to all citation payments. They're pretty much not taken downstairs anymore. We do all of our end-of-month reconciliation, which has relieved hours from the treasurer's office. We enter our own invoices into BSNA, and we also do all of our own accounts receivable through the BSNA system. So our office has taken on a lot of that responsibility. One thing I failed to mention on the 2009 to 2013 is that our maintenance staff also maintains all of the adjacent right-of-way areas that are near the parcels that we maintain. So that's within our maintenance department, not just the office. So again, for 2023, we are recommending that the city fee be 5% of the parking general fees, or parking general revenues.
And the last budget that's being recommended is on page 81, which is the Arts Commission. It is, this is a budget that is contributed by the DDA for $15,000, and city usually contributes $30,000. And they're also looking for a grant from Northwest Michigan Arts Council, and they'll be using $15,000 of fund balance for the mural project that they're working on as a festival. It won't happen until 2024 budget, but there'll be work that needs to be done in advance before. So the DDA works with the Arts Commission and manages that process, and we feel that there's a lot of work that is being done and opportunity for the Arts Commission to be elevated and recognized within the downtown and the city as a whole. And that's the three budgets for your review.
Questions?
Questions? Go ahead.
More a comment, especially for my colleagues, and that is I would caution, well, I'd just caution us to make any changes with service fees. We saw in an earlier presentation, Light and Power in this coming budget year will be paying the city $2 million in the service fee. And that used to be a thorn in the side of many of the members of the Light and Power Board. Some very heated discussions about that. And I pointed out because I'm personally opposed to the counting pencils approach. Like, this is what I did for you, so you owe me the value of this pen. Because if we start counting pencils, we probably can't come up with $2 million of service that the city provides to Light and Power. And so if we want to open that can of worms of revisiting all of the service fees, then that's what we're doing by, potentially what we're doing by looking into this. And to me, that includes the maintenance fee proposed by the DDA in lieu of a service fee. I mean, we can go down that route, but we're opening a huge can of worms, and in the long run, it might not be in the benefit of the city. So I caution us not to move quickly on that. And by way of example, say for specific to the parking, there are a lot of things the city provides for the parking. Say, for example, East Front Street, which was recently repaved. We as the city paid for all of that to be repaved, even though half of that width is for parking. And I don't believe Parking Services paid for the parking portion of that repaving. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that
the DDA paid for half of that.
But it's Parking Services. I mean, it's a parking lot.
Okay.
It's a linear parking lot.
I have to look up
And
our
so-
charter.
Yep, but that's all part of it. Like, if we can go down this path, but it's pretty complex. It seems simple at first, like, yep, let's not charge them as much, but there are good reasons to be charging. And we might regret it, or the community might regret it. Thank you.
If I remember correctly, the fee that's for Light and Power is set by the charter. It is not an optional, it's not a fee. That's what the voters put in there when they created Light and Power. And I know I was there in 2009 when we did that. And there was a lot of things that were going on that the city did pay for, or the parking paid for, or however it did. But there was a lot more services that were being provided within city downstairs. The collection of fines and all that was handled all downstairs. That's all now being converted over to the parking system by itself. And it's the same thing with the DDA. At one point, the city attorney served as there, and that was all included in that fee. So was the city engineer's time. Now all that is billed back to the TIFs, and so it's two different animals at times that's changed. So we could have that discussion, but I'd be in favor of, if we're going to treat one way and the other one in another way, we're treating two units. And, you know, there's nothing in the charter or in our bylaw or of any other utility that has to pay the 5%. It's just that if one utility is paying 5%, all the utilities pay 5%. So Light and Power has been paying it. The water fund pays it. The sewer fund pays it. The Hickory Hills pays it because it is now considered an enterprise. The marina pays it. So everyone needs, and now the parking system, you know, because it's all now in-house over there by itself and not use city services of that, should be paying the same amount. We can argue about the DDA portion of it, but, you know, well, it's just a parking system.
It's the parking system.
Just
for
a
the
parking
5%.
system.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
But
two different
DDA is looking to move to a service fee.
Two
separate conversations.
Excuse me?
DDA paying a service fee
Yeah, they're going to be paying a fee to the city to provide services.
on top of,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's a different
On top
ballgame.
of what? I'm sorry, I'm not.
On top
I'm
of the percentages.
So I think the times have changed with the parking system, you know, because I was one of those that put the 10% in, and I got pretty well yelled at for about 8 years. Or no, that was 2009. I wasn't here then. Never mind. It was after I left. They did that. So there we go. Okay.
Are we
Any
done?
other questions?
Yes, but are we done? I don't want to, it's a totally different topic because you asked us
Well,
all
I
our
just want to make
questions
sure
to the
that we
end,
have any
yeah.
other questions. Thank you very much.
Okay,
Thank
wait,
you
I have
for that
questions about
history.
DDA, not
Thank you.
about that.
Okay.
That was
you got another-
you told us to hold them till the end, so, but
Okay.
mine don't have to do with the
Okay,
fees.
I'm sorry.
So a couple questions I had. Excited to hear the student liaison program is still going on. I know there were some questions at the beginning about how the student in particular that's kicked it off was selected. So could you just briefly explain how you'll find the new one when the senior graduates?
Government for Tomorrow is the organization that we went through. The individual came to the DDA and asked for consideration for student liaison on our board. They first came to the city, and then they came to the DDA. They interview, they ask for applications from the students, and they interview, and then they also train, I guess, their students before they are recommended for the board.
And is that a program that operates in all the schools in our area, or is it only at one of the high schools?
No, all high schools.
Okay, great. And then the other question I had held back was really kind of more of a update. We kind of talk about this sometimes with the changing commissions. We don't always, sometimes there's some gaps in kind of historical knowledge, I guess you could say. And this kind of goes into the TIF funding as well. As someone who was part of the Arts Commission early on and saw the different staff that we went through as we decided how that was going to be managed, would you give a brief overview of how DDA, the Arts Commission has come to be under the DDA and the service you all provide for that?
Yes, the Arts Commission, I believe, had 2 different contractors that served the Arts Commission.
Well, okay, I'll just say this to help you out because there's a ton of history there.
Okay.
More like when you guys picked up the ball, because there was a couple city staff people that came through, then we did some contractors, and then we landed with the DDA, and there's some TIF funding. So kind of work out the mechanisms of the staff time and money, basically.
The staff time and money, so we were contributing $30,000 to the Arts Commission, but now we contribute staff time to manage the Arts Commission, and we also contribute dollars towards the Art Commission as well. And we try to put some dollars aside specifically for projects. So even we contribute $15,000 to the Arts Commission, but we also have dollars for projects within the DDA funds as well. So we have Harry Burkholder is the staff person that is responsible and has the packets to the Arts Commission and works with the Arts Commission directly.
Great, thank you for just.
And that has, I believe, been 3 years, Amy, that we've been doing this.
No, you weren't on before. It's like who's on now and who remembers. But yeah, I just wanted to do that. It was a bit of a process with between city staff and then contracting, and we ended up with the, as you explained, the DDA and some of the TIF funds based on what projects are going on. So I just really wanted to underline that this isn't something that randomly got assigned to the DDA, and sometimes the conversations of how that gets split between the city as well as how that funding gets distributed. So that was just what I was wanting an explanation.
We do not seek out.
I know.
We were asked to serve as staff for the Arts Commission. Those are my questions from the overall.
Sorry, you had another question?
Oh, I said those were my questions from the overall.
So no surprise that I'll likely be voting against the DDA budget again this year. I did last year after I shared a few words about seeing that the DDA budget showing DDA priorities, in my opinion, doesn't align with the priorities of the city and the city commission. And I don't see any changes to the budget, and so I intend to vote against it again this year. And I don't expect any of my colleagues to join me on that, but I would encourage them to think about the housing crisis and the climate crisis, both of which have the word crisis, which indicates some urgency. And the DDA has had as many years as the City Commission has had to look into those. I feel we're making progress here, but I don't feel that there's any progress being made at the DDA.
And I will disagree with you respectfully, so there you go.
Do you have anything to point out about progress on housing or climate?
They've mentioned it, you just didn't
They
hear it.
mention it, and they mention it
Then
at a lot of meetings, but it's a lot of lip
I'll be glad
service.
to mention it at a later meeting.
Thank you. There's nothing in the budget.
That's fine.
I think that's just a comment, so I'm not sure if you're looking, so a lot of times I hear comments, but I'm not sure that you want to hear a response, but I'm happy to respond back to you, Commissioner Warner, so it's part of the budget process. Say thank you.
Okay.
All right. Last but not least. So I should not have gone last because I was going to share this for my disclaimer, but we do not have slides that look as nice as your prior two presentations. Just a couple other things. This is not how I like to do budget presentations. Normally I'm out in front of you and just the way the room lays out. And then I'm going to also do the presentation a little bit in reverse. And what I mean by that is I know the commission kind of has a pretty good idea of what's going on in the city, but the residents may not exactly know. The first thing, if you guys will join me, I honestly think Jonna Robinson and Brian Postma deserve a round of applause. The effort to pull together a budget is hard enough as it is. To do it with pretty much just the two of them with the support of the rest of the staff and departments doing all their work, but the lift that they had to do between two people without a finance director, with how they're stretched and how they've been stretched since the vacancy has been there, is Herculean. And so if you see them in the hall or you stop in and see them, you guys owe them a big thank you. That being said, I'm going to kick off the presentation on the budget with some observations, and I have to give you a disclaimer here. I'm on business day 10. it is very difficult to wrap your head around a budget even when you're there from the very beginning to the point of a presentation. I have not been able to talk to every single department head one-on-one in great detail. I have not been to every facility. I do not know all of the context. But I'm going to do my best as an interim to do what I said I would do when I was interviewed for this position, and that is to be open with you, be honest with you, and share my observations. I know there's press here tonight, and I've kind of watched how the press plays out in Traverse City, so more disclaimers. It is always hard to follow somebody in this role as a city manager or even really any other department, because people do things different. People look at things different. People have a way of hearing and seeing the needs and priorities between staff and commission and public and what have you differently. So what I'm sharing with you tonight are my observations based on my experiences and the way I view the world and the way I view this role. This does not mean anybody has done anything wrong, anybody missed something, anybody dropped the ball, commission, staff, public, anything. And I just want to make that abundantly clear before it gets said otherwise. So I'm sure there's more disclaimers there, but that'll do for tonight because I know we are running low on time. All right, so we're going to start out first with city commission goals. We talked about this a little bit earlier. We've got them printed on the back of the agendas. There is a more detailed sheet that starts to outline some of the different actions and things like that, and we'll just round these out. Housing and homelessness, water systems, access and mobility, climate, connecting people with each other in nature and economic development. As I went through these goals and I look at the document, there's a big disconnect in my opinion. And that is when you start to look at staff responsibilities and day-to-day operations, the statutory requirements, the daily operations and core service delivery, infrastructure, facility maintenance, public safety, and a whole lot more that staff is required to do on a day-to-day basis. When you look at what's currently in place and what staff is responsible for doing, they do not equal each other. There's little to no alignment between those two roles, and it's creating a disconnect. And I'm going to expand on that a little bit further. So let's go more on goals. There's nothing that is bridging those goals and the day-to-day operations and responsibilities together. And so what happens when you don't have that connection, it creates, well, let me just jump ahead here. Whoops. It creates some issues with efficiency, and it's creating an unnecessary tension. Now, tension doesn't mean anger. Tension just means conflict, and conflict doesn't have to mean anger. Maybe conflict is a better word there. And I think there's another question that is outstanding, is do we have the staff capacity and the resources to effectively address the goals? I don't think we have that ability to answer that at this point in time. There's a lot of data missing in order to really bring this budget together and to try to tie your goals and your staff operations together. We have a class and comp study that's in progress. We have a facilities study that's in progress. The city hasn't done a comprehensive streets improvement plan since 2006. We have lots of vacancies for an organization of this size. You have 10 current vacancies, including the city manager. The assistant city manager will be retiring the end of July. The finance director and treasurer that's been vacant for 9 months, 8 months, and a police chief that is getting ready to retire, among others. You have a ton, and I use that, well, I can't think of a better word for it, but you have over 50 employees that are eligible to retire in the next 5 years. If I recall the total staff number right, that's almost a third of your workforce, full-time workforce, I should say, that is eligible to retire in the next 5 years. 18 individuals can retire right now. They could walk out the door tomorrow. Well, they got to give us the notice, put their paperwork in, but they can walk out anytime, with 9 more coming online in the next 12 months. That's a succession issue, an institutional knowledge issue that, again, just based on what conversations I've had thus far, you are not prepared for. And when you start to look at all of those things that are coming down the road, along with your goals and priorities, staff responsibilities of what they're trying to work for, what they're trying to get their departments ready for, that's just an equation that does not really have a solution based on how it's laid out right now. So the outlook. This is another thing that we're finding. So we've got all these issues we just talked about, and they're not all bad issues. I mean, it's things that come with time, but you need to be prepared for them. So we're here tonight to introduce and talk about the fiscal year 2024 budget. So your decisions that you make tonight, what are the impacts going to be on 2025? Or 2026, 27, 28, 29, further out in the future? We're not using a multi-year financial forecast when we're making decisions. So my understanding is there's been efforts to try to get one together, but they haven't been able to get it done. My gut says it's because of the turnover in that department that just they haven't been able to get it there. We've been able to get Jonna and Brian a tool that we think we're going to be able to adapt, but it's going to take some time. The reason I'm bringing this up is the decisions that have been made in the past, so long-term investments, union negotiations, new hires, all that kind of stuff, you haven't really been able to see how are those decisions going to impact the future down the road. And so when we went back to that list of missing data, so let's use that class and comp study, we don't know how that would impact down the road, at least based on the way we're built right now. So we'll use that one as an example. It'll come up again later, but if we have to make a change to class and comp for general employees because we haven't done anything there, we've not fully studied that, you have to be ready for the potential impacts on, say, your pension system over on the general employee side, which we'll talk more about. So my main recommendation to you is it's not going to be easy, but you guys really need a strategic regroup and realignment. You guys have big aspirations, big goals, and I applaud them. I think they all have value. The way city governments operate today are very different than the past. Back in the day, you know, it's police, fire, roads, all that kind of stuff, right? Today, cities have taken on larger roles in these bigger issues that face the nation. In large part, this isn't a political statement, this is just what I've observed. When people don't see action at the larger levels where those issues probably belong, they start to trickle down into other forms of government. Whereas local government, we're the form of government that actually gets stuff done. And so why not take on these other roles? But again, we can't leave aside core service delivery. We can't leave aside police, fire, infrastructure, all those things. We have to figure out how to bridge them together and make them work together. Okay, a couple other things I think about when we're talking about budgets, unfunded liabilities. Your MERS pension plan, which we were talking about earlier, your $17 million unfunded liability. Looks like my formatting got mixed up there. Over $1.7 million is going right into your MERS pension plan annually. Funding ratios at 62.2%. Depending on what you have to do with general employees, that could go down. I don't know to what extent, but the funding level could potentially come down. That is funded from general fund and also your utilities fund. At least with the utilities fund, you have a way to build that into your rate structure. So to try to keep up with those costs or to try to get ahead of those costs, you can always build that into your rates. General fund, you don't have that kind of flexibility with setting your revenue, so it can be a little bit harder to deal with. Fortunately for Traverse City, you guys did implement the PA 345 legislation. So your police and fire, if I'm understanding all that correctly, your police and fire have a totally separate funding source for their pension and their other post-employment benefits. So that helps give your general fund a little bit of breathing room. OPEB, you got all jacked up there. Again, the PA 345 is got its own funding source. Your general fund employees and your utilities, they're on a different OPEB, and that OPEB on those groups is a non-issue. You have more than enough funding there, and I don't know if you can answer, Penny, but are we paying our retiree health care premiums from those proceeds? No, from the general OPEB, the MERS OPEB. The trust, that's what I'm getting at. I guess the trust plan is paying for those premiums now. Okay, that's a good thing. Okay, capital infrastructure, which we're going to focus more on next Monday. Your fleet, you guys use a pool operation, good for you. Everything is funded. You have a fleet that's in good condition. That's not really of any concern that I have at this point in time based on what I've seen and heard. Facilities, streets, another one that came up in a capital meeting the other day, ADA sidewalk ramps. You have no idea what type of unfunded liability exists there right now. And I can tell you right now, just based on a relatively newcomer's observation driving around town, it's in the tens of millions. That's what that street improvement plan is going to help tell you. Ultimately, if it's funded through the budget and it is done, it should give you an idea of how many millions you should be investing in that as is to maintain your current condition level, and then how much more you need to invest to get it to a certain PASER rating. That's separate, again, from your goals and priorities. Let's go back to your goals and priorities for a minute. Nowhere in your budget, unless I haven't found it, is there dollars that are associated with these priorities and funding them to make them happen. You're essentially choosing those things on a project-by-project basis, which is, again, hurting your long-term planning and your ability to make bigger impacts or bigger progress on those goals and priorities. Okay, constitutional impacts. As a resident, as a business owner, it can be easy to kind of forget about Headley and Prop A. I always hate explaining them because they're not always the easiest to explain. But first, before we do that, this chart actually looks really nice compared to what I'm used to working in. You guys actually did not have much of a blip following the recession.
Nope.
And so you're in a lot better condition than a lot of other communities. But what I would note, and I didn't bring a pointer, but when we start to talk about Headley and Prop A, notice how the difference between the orange and the blue lines is slowly growing. That's your difference between taxable value and state equalized value. So what you bring revenues in based on is your orange, but what the properties are actually valued at is the blue. Okay, Headley. I'm going to do my best here. So Headley requires three main things. Voters have to approve any new tax unless it is a pre-Headley tax. There's a couple options there that I don't think you're levying one of them, real small one. Limiting property tax revenue resulting from your assessment increasing, which is kind of tied to the next one, where your revenues you cannot capture. This is the one I hate.
Yeah.
Your millage is only supposed to generate so many dollars, and then you get a calculation that allows for a certain amount of inflation and then new construction. If the growth, if your values exceed a certain level so that you're generating more revenues, your millage rate actually has to fall backwards so you're not capturing as much. That's restriction number one. Now we get into Proposal A, which is a little easier to communicate. This has to do with limiting the value of a property from growing faster than inflation, or excuse me, it's the lesser of inflation or 5%, whichever is less. When a property's sold, that's when it uncaps, and now you basically reset that clock. Which we can actually illustrate a little easier, and I appreciate Polly helping put these together. So the chart is fuzzy, just so it's not your eyes. You did put in your contacts. So this is a sample parcel. We call it Parcel A. It was sold in October for $453,000. What you're seeing here, this like how this room's laid out because I can't point to anything. So you see back in 1999, the taxable value and the final assess were pretty close together. And this one is really telling because look at what the assessed value was back in 1999. Just over $30,000. When this property sold in October 2023, it's not even on the chart. It's well above 100,000. But you see the gap that was made up between when it was sold to the new owner. And again, this gets into a political issue, but really it kind of shows you the difference between what a long-term resident pays versus a new resident pays. It's lost revenue for covering service delivery. During that point of time, the responsibilities, the liabilities, all that stuff grows during that period. And then here's another one. This is a property that has been under the same owner since 1999. And so you can see without a sale the trajectory that those are on and the gap between when they bought that property to now. And we've been talking, when I've had my conversations with commissioners and staff, cost of living comes up constantly. Cost of living means a higher demand on service, and so those come with a cost. Okay, this is the part that really kind of came together really quickly, so it's missing things that I would normally like to go through. But just to highlight, all funds, I'm just talking about general fund primarily, but you are overall responsible for nearly $120 million in expenditures, if that math is right. Yeah. So we've got primary government at just shy of 50 million. Your proprietary funds at 20. Power and light is 40 on its own. Your fiber fund is 2.3, and then the DDA is just over 8. A lot of times people think of of everyday services, but when you look at that number, that accounts for everything that the city is involved in. When you look at general operating by operation or by department, as normal with almost every community, public safety is your #1 cost to your general fund, followed by general government and then public works. Well, and I guess let me just step back for a second. Imagine what your public safety costs would be if you did not have PA 345. Okay, I'm not going to go through this one. It gets a little small, but this just gives you the dollar amounts for the budget by department. ARPA is something we got some questions on, and there is a need for some additional conversation from the City Commission. To date, you've spent spent or encumbered. So encumbered means it's set aside. You've made a commitment to spend $640,832. You've allocated, so I would just call that a bookmark or a placeholder, another $685,000. But just to give you an example of what you're dealing with in this environment, originally it was $150 that was set aside for general neutral restrooms at the fire stations.
Living quarters.
What was that?
Living quarters.
Living quarters, thank you for clarifying. But the actual estimate came in over double what was set aside. And then there is an unencumbered balance that between the allocated not spent and the balance unencumbered, there's another $328,000 that we need to talk about. By the statute and the guidelines, you need to have everything encumbered by December of 2024. That means there needs to be contracts let, commitments need to be out there. I should note, because I know it's been a topic of interest, in that allocated not spent, I believe it's in that line, there is, one of those two lines has $500,000 towards the senior center right now. It's in the spent one? Okay, so we put it in the encumbered line. Thank you, Brian. Okay, this one's going to get a little hard to read, but I think, yeah, we're good on time for a minute. So this is where we start to try to illustrate to the City Commission why you have a projected increase in your fund balance of approximately $2 million. First and foremost is on your revenues. You've had a number of revenues that have come in higher than expected. Primarily component unit fees and your tax revenue and revenue sharing did come in higher. I believe there was some one-time bumps to that in the last budget. The biggest impact is on expenses. And the vast majority, I didn't do the math to give you a nice clean percentage, but the vast majority of why you are under there is because of staff vacancies. We have a temporary recruiter that is working in human resources now that is working his tail off to try to get applicants for positions. I've been overhearing him on the phone trying to talk with potential fire recruits. But there is a lot of churn right now, and trying to find good talent, especially for some of these higher level positions that you're going to be looking for, that causes extended vacancies, and you can't budget for that. You never know how long it's going to take you to fill a vacancy. So when I say that to be cautious of whether or not that fund balance is real, it's the combination of everything we spoke about earlier, of all the unknowns, the constant churn on trying to fill staffing, the unfunded liabilities like capital that we don't know, class and comp, all those things. I'd be very cautious to just say, oh, we've got $2 million to spend, let's spend it. Again, I think we need to regroup and realign. That being said, next steps. We're going to focus more on capital at a week from tonight. That's where we'll get in a little bit more into streets, in particular facilities. We'll get into some utility. We'll talk about utility rates that night. And we also have the public hearing that night. May 30th, which is the Tuesday after Memorial Day, has been set aside for if needed. And then adoption has to be done on June 5th by charter. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. But before I do that, just remember, I mean, you guys have been around and doing this long enough that the budget, especially these days, is a living document. We can work on this as we go throughout the fiscal year. As new projects come up, you can do amendments at that time, or I'm guessing you probably do quarterly amendments or something along those lines. So approving it as is, if you were to do that, I'm not suggesting you do, does not mean that's all set in stone. It does not mean, I have never worked a budget and looked at it as a license to spend. It's a guideline in which to spend within, but it is not, okay, they put $100,000 in this line item, I'm going to go spend $100,000, if that gives you any sort of comfort. With that, happy to take any questions.
Tim.
Strategic regroup and realignment.
Mm-hmm.
To your list of infrastructure, like you're mostly keyed on streets, and that's fine. But I would encourage you to add inflow and infiltration. We've talked about that many times up here over the past 4 years, even back when we were on Zoom. And we have money from ARPA, not encumbered but allocated. We actually included it in a budget 2 years ago. We just haven't gotten to that point. But to me, we as a community are spending money and more money every year the longer we don't address it.
100% agree. We're actually going to be talking about that a little bit more on the 22nd.
Great.
Staff kind of brought me up to speed on some of the history about the stormwater utility discussions and things like that. And so that is something we need to talk more about.
Thank you.
Yes.
And brief comment as well. I just wanted to say, the graphs about Headley and Proposal A, without knowing it, that's what I've been waiting 7.5 years to see. It's a thorn, I won't say thorn on my side, it's definitely something under the skin, because as you keyed it up, not everybody understands it, and it's not a simple, neither one are simple to process. I guess I would say, since we're talking about disclaimers though, because sometimes people can key in on bits and pieces, those are statutory. They're not going away. If you've been in your house for 40 years, you're not going to have your taxes raised in the next couple of years. We're not getting rid of those. But I think that was a really good graph to show when we hear people get up and say, well, we see all these houses being built, or I see these apartments being built, and you guys have all this money coming in. I think it's great to have demonstrations of that to show what we up here have tried to say numerous times, but it helps to have graphics to say, well, we're not really realizing that, because when that house sells and you get that much income, you get those rollbacks, you get that change. And so I appreciate that being a very organized and, as you said, good-looking graph to introduce that, or not to introduce that concept, but to open that conversation up a little bit more, because it is something that we allude to, but we haven't really, I don't think, demonstrated very well in the past.
It can be easy when things are going pretty well and streets are still getting plowed and stuff's still getting taken care of, to think that everything's all getting done and we've got the money to do whatever we want and all that. And that's, in most communities, that's not the case. But you make it look good.
A couple of questions. I'm sorry.
So I did have what I hope is a quick question, and this may be something you're going to address next week, but you mentioned that there is one small tax that we're not currently utilizing. Can you say more about that?
I can. It's PA 359, I believe. I've heard it called different things in different communities. Economic development tax, public information tax, whatever. It's a pre-Headley millage that allows you to levy a millage equal to $50,000. So the way it would show up on a Traverse City tax bill would be like 0.00000 something. And what that can be used for is basically public information and promoting your, I think it says residential and industrial areas, or residential, commercial, industrial areas. And so what you could potentially use that for is offsetting things like our public information communications role, potentially website costs, things of that sort. It's most places, I wouldn't say most, a lot of communities levy it because, especially in the recession, everybody was looking for every little bit that could help. And, you know, just seeing, which I meant to make a comment on, just seeing the first part of the meeting with the Citizens Academy, I mean, that communication is so critical. I mean, that's become almost like a core service, because if you don't tell your story, someone else is going to. And I can tell you, and I'm sure the staff that's been here a long time, is there's a lot of stories that are being told out there that aren't true. So the more that you guys can do to tell that story, to give those experiences to your residents, to build your bench, that is something, I mean, personally, I know people don't like talking about taxes, but it's a small one. It's at least a little bit of revenue that can give you some breathing room, although very little. What you guys are doing and what you're responsible for with how you're built right now, given all the pressures on talent and vacancies, I would be concerned long term. If I were a resident here and knew everything that I knew that's up here in different places, I would be concerned. And that's not to just throw alarm bells or to scare people or anything like that. But this is a totally different world right now. There's just not the people out there to do this stuff. Costs are skyrocketing. Wait till you see the numbers and some of the examples of, what was the one we were talking about? Was it concrete or asphalt? One of the ones, wait till you see the costs from just a couple years difference. It's a whole different world. You will not be able to do everything that you've been doing for years without any impacts to services or revenues. Economic development's great, but it's not going to solve your problem. Potential problem, I should say. I've only been here 10 days. I don't know exactly what it is.
Okay, thank you. Got more discussion to have. Yes, Tim.
Yeah, a follow-up on the Headley and Prop A, because I concur with everything that was said, and think we can never do too much to try to help the public understand it. And there was a very valuable graphic from former City Treasurer Tweetmeyer that I would encourage be shared with you. It shows 4 houses, all the same, very simplified. It was for our benefit or a previous city commission, and it's a great way, I think, to explain it. Not that you didn't do it. But again, the more we try to share it with the public, I think the better.
No, I see a project for Colleen coming.
Yeah, I mean, I probably have it filed someplace, but hopefully there's an electronic
I'm
version
sure it's
somewhere.
around somewhere.
Thank you.
Not just the public, but new commissioners as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
I mean,
it never hurts to hear it a few
My
more
head is
times.
hurting right now. I'm not as smart as you.
No, I've just lived through it longer than you. Okay.
Any more questions?
I think we're having more discussion. I'm going to have a couple of questions as we adopt the budget, but if we do so, because I know we've had some positions that's been recommended as we adopt it, they could be funded, but we're not ready, you're saying we're not ready to hire anybody at this point.
I appreciate the indicator that I missed something. Yes, I think in general, the number of positions are justified. I think some of them are easier to justify than others, but there are some clarifications and conversations I want to have with staff on the titles and the job descriptions. This goes back to goals and priorities. And then I think there's a potential that I may have an additional recommendation, but it's probably going to be a recommendation that I would leave behind for your future city manager. I don't know that that's a role, if it comes together like I'm thinking, that you would want me to fill in the interim. But if I get ready, if it's during budget process, I'll share that with you. But at some point, it'll be something I'll leave behind if we don't put it into the budget.
But as you say, budgets can be amended.
Absolutely. All right.
Yeah.
And I got you done before 9:30.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. We normally don't open it up for something like this as a presentation, but anyone have any comments they would like to make at this point? You know, as it
Final
relates
public
to
comments,
this point in our budget, we're not making any decisions tonight on this.
Are we at
Okay,
final
please.
public comment, Richard?
Well, hang on, I'll just let him do
We
that.
can be at specific public comment.
Once again, Dr. Martin Dudziak, Traverse City resident on 438 Cockland Street. Overall, I want to make one basic comment. I think everyone here is making a committed job and a sound sense of applying themselves to a world that is in transition on many points. And I'm not going to go into length about what those are, but I'm going to underscore the overall environment, not only the climate, but also socially, politically, and we see this in the transition that has come about over the past 20 years to this community, and even longer. I'm only recently a permanent resident. It was partly instigated by coming back for an extended Christmas holiday, and then COVID came. But I was first here 45 years ago. I'm not going to go into length on this right now. I want to make a special commendation to the lady whose name I've forgotten from TC Light and Power for a really excellent presentation that shows a big picture kind of thinking, as I can perceive from that. And what I'm just going to close here with is I think we need a really broad, big picture thinking that looks at the picture of, for instance, somewhere in the budget even if it's only a couple $1,000s, should be something directed towards, let's plan ahead for the next century. The next century. We're going to see tremendous changes that are not going to be that evident in our lifetimes of anybody in this room, but they're going to really hit hard in the lives of children, and like some of you probably, I have small grandchildren. We are in a tremendous transition, and just think about the fact of where Traverse City is, in the heart of the largest and only large source of fresh water on the planet, not counting East Africa and Lake Baikal. That's significant. And there are other things. So I'm just urging that somehow in your budget thinking to put in some effort and some energy and bring aboard some people, even some who might be willing to volunteer.
Excuse me,
on the
sir,
next
thank you. Thank you
100
for your
years.
comments. Your time's elapsed. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay. I'll open it up now for any general public comment. Okay, great. We don't have that, and we didn't have reserve. Is there any comments from mayor or commissioners? Good. We're going into closed session.
If you have signatures, we can sign them now, so you don't have to wait for closed session.
Here's the big question.
Picked a good one.
I wanted to make you all.
Kind of kidding.
I hate it when
All
everyone's
right,
gonna
just
take
right in the
some.
square. No problem. God help us.
Sorry, I had to wait so long.
Haven't gotten that far.
I know.
Um,
Great to say it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I hereby declare this meeting adjourned.
You gotta have a motion to go out of closed session.
No, we don't.
No, we don't.
We don't do that.
We don't do that.
What?
Okay.
I had to tell them, I had to tell them about the power.
Don't say anything.
I have to do it in closed session because they were already leaving. I think they were in closed session.